Reginald F. Lewis, and the making of a billion-dollar empire. He was a local paperboy who became a Wall Street tycoon.
The thing that I admired about Reginald Lewis, he was a take-charge kind of a guy.
Breaking racial barriers in the corporate world.
Reg Lewis, in many ways, was the Jackie Robinson of business.
He bought a global conglomerate, 64 companies across 31 countries.
No African American has done ever a big deal like that.
Reginald F. Lewis, pioneer. Reginald F. Lewis was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1942. He was raised by a tight-knit family that nurtured a sound education, unyielding pride, and a strong work ethic.
My grandfather said, know your job, and you'll never be in a bread line.
By the 1950s, racial tensions were deepening in Baltimore. It was the site of one of the nation's first sit-ins. Schools were being desegregated, and white flight was peaking.
So when we moved here, all the white people, because it was a whole white block, moved out. So right from the beginning, we had obstacles at very young age that we were aware of, but Mom and Dad didn't bring it home. They just told us that we had to be twice as good and we had to work.
My father was very driven from a very young age. When he was 9, he decided that he wanted to become the richest black man in America.
He had a newspaper route in this neighborhood where he delivered Afro-Americans that Mom took over for him one summer when she sent him to camp.
He went to summer camp, and for 2 weeks, I served and collected the money. And the first thing he said when he walked through the door, "Where's my money?" I said, "I did the work, I earned the money." And he said, "Mom, I'm gonna get a lawyer and sue you." So Butch said, "Give him his money." And he said, "Thank you." He didn't give me a tip and just left.
At Dunbar High School in Baltimore, Reginald Lewis was a 3-sport all-star athlete. He played football as a quarterback, basketball as a guard, and baseball as a shortstop. Between schoolwork, year-round sports, and part-time jobs, Lewis had little time left for play. As a teenager, he was already tough-minded and determined to succeed.
So he went to Virginia State on a partial football scholarship, and then he injured his right shoulder. And what a tragic injury for a right-handed quarterback, a shortstop, and a basketball player who shot with his right hand.
At Virginia State, he made that switch, and by the time he was a senior, was really focused on business and school and advancing his studies, which is why when he saw the ad for the Harvard Law School summer program, that first year that they launched it, he was already able to identify and say, "Oh yes, I want that."
A funny thing happened during that summer. By the end of the program, I really didn't care if I got in or not. I'd done my best and I knew I could compete.
My father, after the 8 weeks, went back to Baltimore, but then just like a week or 2 later, got a call and was in, and was told that he is the only person to get into Harvard Law School without formally applying. Graduating from Harvard Law School, Dad went to the best kind of job that you could have, a blue-chip Wall Street law firm. The one he went to was called Paul Weiss, Wharton, Rifkin, and Garrison.
The Paul Weiss experience was a very good one for me. My skills developed and matured enormously. But at the risk of offending many friends there, it was not an especially happy time for me. And I never really felt at home or able to relax.
So in 1970, my father left Paul Weiss and started a law firm, the first African-American law firm on Wall Street, with some other lawyers. But he only did that for a couple of years, and then he moved on to have his own practice.
During those early years, while Lewis sharpened his legendary negotiation skills, he met the woman who would become his wife.
I met Reginald Lewis on a blind date. I was the one who proposed. We got married 6 months after we met. Yes, wedding in the Philippines. Early in the morning, it was a Holy Mass at around 7 o'clock, so waking up at 4. My wedding gown was hand-embroidered. We were in a small chapel. I was almost walking on clouds. It's like a dream because I never intended to get married. The vision was that he'll be taking care of the big expenses, mortgage, children's education. I will take care of household. So those first years were tough, but I had faith. I had faith in him.
In those lean years, as Lewis's law practice and reputation began to grow, he purposefully set aside time to use his legal expertise in support of civil rights.
I first met Reginald in the early 1970s. Reginald F. Lewis was the corporate attorney for the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice. In the early 1970s, there was a backlash to school desegregation, a violent backlash, where white paramilitary, white supremacist groups physically attacked us at the United Church of Christ Church in Wilmington. And as a result of that attack, a riot happened. 10 of us were arrested in 1972, and we became known as the Wilmington 10 as a result of our unjust arrests. And so they issued a warrant for my arrest, and I was in New York at the time. And the thing that I admired about Reginald Lewis, he was a take charge kind of a guy. On the plane, we discussed when the plane landed, who was gonna go off the plane first and who was gonna go off the plane last. And Reggie says, look, I'm your lawyer, follow me. The sheriff reached for me even while I was stepping down the steps. Reggie grabs the sheriff's arm and said, wait a minute, who are you? And the sheriff said, well, I'm the high sheriff, who are you? And Reggie said, I'm Reginald F. Lewis, I represent Reverend Shavers. I need to see your identification. That's the kind of lawyer that Reginald Lewis was. That's the kind of, I would say even activist he was. Yes, he was a Wall Street, highly trained corporate lawyer, but he was a strong freedom fighter for civil rights.
But Lewis had another dream. He was an intense, driven risk taker who wanted the power and the money from the world of high finance. And he wanted to be the first African American to get it.
I remember that Reg decided that he was going to put more time into venture capital, and he wanted to form a company that he decided to call TLC Group, which he never would admit, but we think it was for the Lewis companies. That's what TLC stand for.
He would always talk, at night when the children are asleep, about the business, about what's happening. I think it's his way of decompressing. I always consider it like there's a ball of string in his head. And just by talking about it slowly, it's coming out and it clarifies his mind.
If you have a core set of values, like family, like hard work, like trust, then these are things that will stay with you even when you may be having a difficult time in a specific problem. But if you maintain the core values, you can generally ride through any particular problem, and then in the end, will be able to be pleased with the result.
He wanted to be seen not just as an African-American businessman. He wanted the message to be that he was an American businessman, that he was a success in his own right, that he was not some sort of a token or some sort of ethnic person who they picked and put in there. He wanted to demonstrate that it was his hard work, his intelligence, and his drive that made him a success.
By the time the early 80s arrived, Lewis had experienced several failed business acquisitions. Yet, he was undeterred. Instead of stopping, he went after an acquisition that was bigger and bolder than anything he had attempted so far.
Any deals that we saw were always warmed over or nobody else wanted to do it. So the McCall Pattern Company became available. And the reason it was available is because the number of units sold in that industry had declined for 10 straight years, yet McCall was still profitable.
Lewis wanted to close big leverage buyout deals. To make all the numbers work, he had to buy a mature company with a predictable, stable cash flow, which would allow him to pay off the tremendous debt once the deal was done. The big question was, who could help him get the financing done?
The role of investment bankers is one of the great mysteries of the universe. The simple fact is that you don't hire investment bankers, you hire people. Because Phyllis Schless had labored for many years on Wall Street with one of the top investment banks, Bear Stearns, I wanted her thoughts about the best price to pay for McCall.
We needed to get Reg in touch with the people who were selling McCall, and we needed to get him treated seriously. So the first thing I did was to basically bridge him to the establishment.
In the McCall-Pattern transaction, my role was to provide the senior financing, $19 million out of the $22.5 million that was the sale. Getting the bank part was the tough part in the early days of leverage buyouts. And '83 was the very early days. I have to admit, when I first met Reg, I wasn't told that he was black, so it was a little bit of a surprise when I walked out of my office. There weren't that many black entrepreneurs in New York City at the time. In my thinking, I put aside completely the fact that he was black. I didn't see how it should or could be part of the decision.
Then, things weren't moving fast enough for Reg. He wanted it to close instantly.
I felt I was stuck on the McCall deal and was not sure whether Bear Stearns was trying to scuttle the deal or not. I decided to give them a little competition.
And Reg went out behind my back, literally, and he talked to other investment bankers and people. Maybe they could move faster, he thought. We dropped him. Bear dropped him because he breached our agreement. A week later, I got a phone call that said, "I'm really sorry." There were words I never thought I would hear out of his mouth, ever. "If I double your fees, will you take me back?" We had initially had a fee, I think, of $250,000. He doubled it to $500,000, which was not a lot of money, but it was 1983.
First of all, once we bought McCall, all of a sudden we were in a different tier. You know, we were now owners, or Reg was now an owner of a decent-sized company with a brand name. It's amazing how things changed after that. All of a sudden, we were getting telephone calls. Everybody wanted to interview Reg. You know, it was a huge deal.
TLC bought McCall Pattern Company with $1 million and only 3 years later sold it for an astounding $90 million. This single investment cemented Lewis's place as a major Wall Street financier and a prominent corporate takeover dealer. While the media focused on him, he leveraged his new wealth to help the African American community.
He was Jesse Jackson's first big funder in a significant way, handing Jesse Jackson a $100,000 check unsolicited and loaning his plane to Jesse Jackson for campaign trips.
And from where I stand, Jesse Jackson better understands the fundamental changes that are occurring in America and in the world today, more so than any other candidate that I've heard so far.
This candidacy of Jesse Jackson was an inspiration to him personally. And I remember the fundraiser that my dad threw for Jesse Jackson. It was thrilling. It was a thrilling time to feel like a black man could be in the White House.
His support for the campaigns was not just his support for friendship. Once he saw it was a possibility, remote but possible, he invested in the future. He offered the rope of hope. He offered what was possible. He never stopped giving, whether it was the civil rights movement, political leadership, or the universities. He never stopped giving.
Around the time of the closing of the McCall Pattern Company, Lewis got a tip about an even bigger business opportunity. Beatrice International, an enormous global food company, was about to be sold. Lewis had the audacity to go for it. But he needed the financial backing of a businessman and company who were leaders in financing these deals. He reached out to Drexel, Burnham, and Lambert.
He persuaded me at Hello when he accomplished at McCall Pattern, a company that I would have never bought because I didn't feel that strongly about the industry. And the minute he showed me his plan for Beatrice International, he had me.
In those days, the high-yield piece of the business, though, was really dominated by Drexel. There wasn't anybody else of any significance that was in the high-yield piece. And you needed that high-yield piece for him to get his whole financing done.
One of the major challenges for Black entrepreneurs was and is access to capital. And what Reggie was able to do from some of the top financial firms in the marketplace was to articulate a vision and a rationale, and in fact, engender a level of credibility that people provided him with the capital. And that was extraordinary.
We had many other people around the world approaching us whether we would finance them to buy Beatrice. It was clear that Beatrice International situation, that Reg knew it better than anyone. I think he knew it better than KKR, who owned the company at the time. And he had a plan.
Reginald Lewis knew that if he was going to pull this deal off, the sale would be of historic proportions. The key to this huge acquisition was figuring out how to make the tax components of this deal work and how to double the cash flow in order to pay off the massive debt. If Lewis failed, he would lose everything. His bold gamble? Sell off parts of Beatrice International's worldwide operation at the same time that he was buying it.
The deal closing process itself was full of drama. We got a call from Drexel saying, you guys are going to have to come out here to Beverly Hills and you're going to have to explain to us what the tax deduction is going to be or no deal.
Well, there was a lot of negotiations going on between the senior people at Drexel and Reg and his team, and therefore there was always tension.
The closing of the Beatrice International deal took place on November 29, November 30 of 1987. That was, at least to that point, a very unique point in history because Wall Street had had a total meltdown the prior month in 1987. No transactions were being closed. The fact that we were able to close a gargantuan deal, novel for its time, given its international character, was just, it was absolutely off the charts.
I think KKR knew we were going to have the highest bid and was going to go with us all along, but they created doubt in our minds so that we effectively topped our own bid and increased it to $985 million. But that ultimately took it.
I remember the day of the announcement of the Beatrice acquisition, and I remember calling him to congratulate him and telling him how proud he was. But I remember all the calls that went around the country of African Americans saying, this is absolutely incredible. It was historic.
In becoming the CEO of Beatrice International, Lewis was catapulted into an exclusive group of business leaders at the pinnacle of industry.
He bought 64 companies in 31 countries for almost $1 billion. So in that sense, he is a pioneer. No African American has done ever a big deal like that on a leveraged buyout. And so when it hit the press, it was like front pages all over.
The extraordinary level of debt and taxes the Beatrice International deal generated could have resulted in a financial disaster. But Lewis had the business acumen to prevent that from happening. He closed the deal and then immediately stepped up to the monumental job of running his global business empire.
So when I was 9, my dad took me on one of his tours of his factories. We started off in Ireland at the potato chip factory, and then we went to Spain to the ice cream factory, and then we went to Belgium to the bottling company. And my dad talks to me and says, you know, this is the real business, Christina. This costs like 3 cents, and they sell it for $3. He was like, this is the business.
With his legacy firmly established, Louis was in pursuit of the next big deal. He was starting to enjoy the fruits of his success when tragedy struck.
It was around New Year that the biopsy came, and he was diagnosed with brain cancer.
I remember going home for Christmas and seeing my father not himself. He had lost a lot of weight. And he said, "It's serious, baby." And maybe a month later, he was dead. Yeah. It was such an intense time. And it was shocking that someone so full of life, really at the peak of his career, could all of a sudden be gone.
Operating as an African American in this pressure cooker of New York, high finance, high legal drama, exacts its toll.
Mr. Lewis died when he was 50. Leslie was 19 and Christina was 12. Each of us handled it differently. For myself, I couldn't really say the Our Father. I could not say they will be done. Because, it was like that. But I never said, why me? I accepted God's will, but it was just so hard.
There is no doubt that Reginald Lewis's success paved the way for me and many others. And I think that really is the test and demonstration of real leadership, is what is the foundation that you have created? What is the legacy that you've left?
The Reginald F. Lewis International Law Center is the result of a $3 million gift that my father gave to Harvard Law School before he passed away. It was the largest donation that they'd ever received from a living individual, period. Not just Black person, period, for Harvard Law School.
Lewis cared deeply about how to inspire talented people to do their best work.
Ooh, it's working on.
And his daughter, Christina, continues his mission by creating a foundation that teaches computer programming to young African American and Latino men.
All-Star Code is creating a new generation of Reginald Lewises.
Did you make this?
Yeah.
Very cool.
We're also creating the next generation of coders, video game designers, and computer repairmen.
That pioneering spark of entrepreneurship which ignited Reginald F. Lewis as a teenager never went out. Even in the face of adversity and extraordinary obstacles, he accomplished what few have been able to do. At a convocation speech at the University of New Mexico School of Law, he delivered a message of hope and determination.
When we're confronted with a challenge or working against superior resources or superior odds, I frequently wonder whether what we're doing is worth the effort. And somehow I remember all of the people who went before, who had even greater odds.
So if there's one message that I would like to leave to the class of 1990, it is that you keep going to build a better society in America, to be a compassionate America, that you keep going no matter what. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Support for this program has been generously provided by Taurus and Kimberly Richardson, Robert F. Smith, and the following. For a complete list of program supporters, visit wliw.org/pioneers.